Hello everyone, welcome to today's session. Today we are going to talk about punishments in school. The objectives of today's lesson are to understand the terms discipline and punishment, to know the importance of discipline, to identify the types of punishment, to understand positive discipline and its background, and to learn how to use reinforcement in classroom. Punishing children is regarded as a common and an acceptable practice in the family or in schools. It is often considered essential so that children grow up to be competent and responsible individuals. School discipline is as important as teaching and learning activities. School shapes an individual and brings a holistic development in a student. Therefore, in this session, we will see how discipline can be implemented to promote a harmonious environment in school. First, we will see what discipline is. Discipline is a set of actions or measures taken by a teacher towards a student or groups of students after the student's behavior upsets or brings disorder in the ongoing educational activity or breaks an established rule created by the school system. Discipline is extremely important since it guides students' behavior or creates limits to help them learn to value and respect others, obey rules, and take care of themselves and the world around them. For a teacher, bringing discipline in the classroom can be a very challenging part of teaching. Keeping 30 to 40 students calm, engaged, and motivated to learn is rather a tough task. Usually, when a child is in school, a teacher is expected to act as a substitute parent. In every school, there is a set of rules. If students break these rules, they are subjected to disciplinary actions, or in other words, punishments. A punishment is implementing a strict action by an authority as a response to and deterring future repetition of a particular action or behavior that is deemed undesirable or unacceptable. Punishments are quite common in schools. Students are punished for various reasons, and the type of punishment they receive depends on the type of offense they have committed. Often, we hear that students are punished harshly even for petty wrongdoings. Therefore, we need to understand how students can be reprimanded appropriately so the teacher is not excessively harsh or lenient towards children. And for this, we first need to understand why punishment is a necessary component of classroom management and the importance of discipline in classroom. The importance of discipline. The aim of discipline is to control or restrict certain behaviors or attitudes that are considered harmful or going against school policies, educational norms, or school traditions. Thus, disciplining students is important to create a safe and enjoyable learning environment. Discipline is something that is acquired through training and experience. Discipline is one of the dimensions of classroom management. Implementing disciplinary actions is creating an opportunity for students to reflect and learn about their consequences, and also to instill values and acquire behavior that is acceptable in the classroom. Corporal punishment in the context of schools can be defined as causing deliberate pain to a student in response to the student's undesired behavior and use of his or her language. Corporal punishment is purposeful infliction of bodily pain or discomfort or hurting physically by an official in the educational system as a punishment or penalty for unacceptable behavior. Often we get to hear that students were beaten up with the cane, strap or stick if they did something wrong. This sort of punishment is identified as corporal punishment. In the guidelines for eliminating corporal punishment in schools, it is stated that children are subjected to corporal punishment in schools and places which is meant for care and protection of children, such as hostels, orphanages and juvenile homes, and even in the family. The guideline also states that corporal punishment should be classified as physical punishment, mental harassment, and discrimination. Physical punishment includes action that causes pain, hurt or injury, and discomfort to a child. The guideline identifies certain punishments as corporal punishments, like causing physical harm to children by hitting, kicking, scratching, pinching, biting, pulling the hair, boxing ears, smacking, slapping, spanking with cane, stick, shoe, chalk, duster, belt, whip, or giving electric shock, etc. Even putting children in an uncomfortable position like standing with school bag on head, holding ears through legs, etc., or forced indigestion of anything, for example, washing soap, mud, chalk, hot spices, etc., and detention in classroom or library or toilet or any closed space in the school. Mental harassment like sarcasm that hurts or lowers the child's dignity, using derogatory remarks for the child, ridiculing the child with regard to her background or status or parental occupation or caste, gender, non-payment of fees, ridiculing the child with regard to her health status or of the family, especially HIV/AIDS and TB, shaming the child to motivate the child to improve his performance, ridiculing a child with developmental problems such as learning difficulty or a speech disorder such as stammering or speech articulation disorder. Corporal punishments in school has now disappeared from most Western countries. However, corporal punishment, often by caning, remains commonplace in some schools of our country. However, the Ministry of Women and Child Development has issued a new set of guidelines that bans physical punishment of students. Teachers have to spare the rod, else they would end up in jail. There's the latest warning to teachers from government who resort to corporal punishment. Now we will discuss a few common forms of punishments that are implemented in schools. First is detention. Detention is one of the common punishments in schools in many countries. A student who is subjected to detention is sent to a designated area of the school during a specified time on a school day and remain there for a specified period of time, but also may require a student to report to that part of school at a certain time on a non-school day, example on a Saturday. Detention is given for offences, especially for serious ones, but not quite serious enough for suspension. However, according to the guidelines for eliminating corporal punishment, identifies detention as a corporal punishment. Next is suspension. Suspension or temporary expulsion is mandatory leave assigned to a student as a form of punishment that can last anywhere from 1 day to a few days or even weeks. During suspension, the student is not allowed to attend regular classes. Sometimes, the student is sent to report to school as usual but attend a designated suspension room all day. However, the most common form of suspension bans the student from being on school grounds or classroom during school hours while school is in session. Schools notify students' parents or guardians the reason for and the duration of suspension. Suspended students are often required to continue to learn and complete assignments from the days in which they miss classes. Next is expulsion. Expulsion or permanent exclusion terminates the student's education in a particular school. This is the last resort when all other methods of discipline have failed. However, in extreme situations, it may also be used for a single serious offence. Usually, the principal or the head teachers may make the decision for expelling someone. Next is counselling. Counselling is also provided when a student has to see a school counsellor if they behave negatively. The purpose of counselling is to help the student recognize their mistakes and also to find positive ways to make changes in the student's life. Counselling can also help the student clarify the expectations and standards of the school as well as understand the consequences of failing to meet those standards. Next is restorative justice. As an alternative to the usual practices like detention, suspension and expulsion, restorative justice is used. Restorative justice was established to give students an opportunity to make a positive contribution to their community. The student who has misbehaved has the opportunity not only to give their side of the story but also have a say in their consequence. Consequences defy the traditional methods of punishment like detention, suspension or expulsion and instead give students an opportunity for restoration. Next is positive discipline. Now we will see how teachers can bring down punishments and at the same time maintain discipline in school. One of the ways to achieve this is adopting positive discipline. Positive discipline is a discipline model used by school and in parenting that focuses on the positive points of behavior. It is based on the idea that there are no bad children, just good and bad behavior. Teachers can reinforce good behaviors while treating the bad behaviors without hurting the student verbally or physically. People engaging in positive discipline are not ignoring problems. Rather, they are actively involved in helping the child learn how to handle situations more appropriately while remaining calm, friendly and respectful. Positive discipline includes a number of different techniques that used in combination can lead to a more effective way of parenting and manage the child's behavior. Positive discipline contrasts with negative discipline. Negative discipline may involve angry, destructive or violent responses to inappropriate behavior. Let's see a few examples to understand the difference between positive and negative discipline. Positive reinforcement, such as complimenting a good effort. Positive punishment, such as requiring a child to clean up a mess. And negative punishment, such as removing a privilege in response to poor behavior. However, unlike negative discipline, positive discipline adopts a kind, encouraging and firm manner. The focus of positive discipline is to establish reasonable limits and guides children to take responsibility to stay within these limits or learn how to remedy the situation when they don't. Positive Discipline is a program developed by Dr. Jane Nelson. It is based on the work of Alfred Adler and Rudolf Dreckers and designed to train young people to become responsible, respectful and resourceful members of the community. Dr. Adler first introduced the idea of parenting education to United States audience in the 1920s. He advocated treating children respectfully. However, he argued that spoiling and pampering children should not be encouraged and could result in social and behavioral problems. The classroom techniques, which were initially introduced in Vienna in the early 1920s, were brought to the United States by Dr. Dreckers in the late 1930s. Many other authors have carried on parenting and classroom work of Alfred Adler. For example, Jane Nelson gives the following criteria for effective discipline that teaches to be kind and firm at the same time, like respectful and being encouraging, help children feel a sense of belonging and significance, that is, forming a connection, teaches valuable social and life skills for good character, respect, concern for others, problem solving, accountability, contribution, cooperation. Invites children to discover how capable they are and to use their personal power in constructive ways. The positive discipline model aims at developing mutually respectful relationship and is neither penalizing or unduly lenient. Promoting positive correction of questionable behavior within the classroom dynamic as opposed to out-of-class punishment like detention, suspension or expulsion can encourage learning and discourage future misbehavior. Learning to one's own negative behavior can also contribute to positive growth in social, emotional learning. In short, positive behavior supports the acquisition of replacement behavior, the appreciation of individual differences, strategies for self-control, introspection and improvement in the quality of life for all. For optimal learning to happen in classroom, it is necessary for the teacher to have the students' behavior under check. It is also important for students to be given clear expectations so that they know exactly what behaviors are expected from them in the school. Just as the principle of reinforcement and punishment can be utilized in the home, they can also be used to help with the management of behavior at school. Now we will see what reinforcement means. Reinforcement is a consequence following a behavior that increases the probability that the behavior will increase in the future. Reinforcement and punishment are common terms that most people have heard of and use on a daily basis. In order to understand the difference between reinforcement and punishment, it is important to understand the definitions of both the terms. First, we will see reinforcement. Reinforcement is a consequence following a behavior that increases the probability that the behavior will increase in the future. The consequence can be either positive or negative. Positive reinforcement is something added to the consequence that will increase the probability of that particular behavior in the future. Example: if the students do well in science test, then the teacher doesn't give them homework over the weekend. Next is negative reinforcement. Negative reinforcement is often interpreted incorrectly and becomes confused with punishment. But we can see that negative reinforcement is used to increase desired behavior and is not punishing in any form. On the contrary, punishment is a consequence following a behavior that decreases the probability that a particular behavior will occur in the future. Now we will see the difference between positive punishment and negative punishment. Positive punishment: something added to the consequence that will decrease a certain behavior in the future. For example, if a child misbehaves, he can be asked to arrange everyone's books in a particular way. Negative punishment: when a consequence includes the removal of an item or privilege that will decrease the behavior in the future. Example: if a child fails in a test, his cell phone can be taken away for a week. In addition to keeping behavior under control, reinforcement in classroom should be used to keep students engaged and motivated to learn. Teachers should use reinforcement often in order to maintain a positive learning environment and to promote appropriate classroom behavior. Now let's have a look at the screen to look at the examples of reinforcement that be used in the classroom. First is teacher praise, earning privileges, teacher attention, reducing homework or assignment, extra break or lunch time, and extending a deadline for a submission. Next is using punishment in the classroom. Punishment is used in the classroom to decrease undesirable behavior. Punishment in the classroom needs to be implemented with care and should never be used to single out students or to punish behavior that are due to specific disability. If a particular student has challenging behavior as a result of a disability, it is important to seek additional assistance to accommodate the student. Generally, reinforcement should be the primary strategy utilized in the classroom, but if punishment is necessary, it needs to be the least restrictive type of punishment. Before implementing any punishment strategies, it is important to check with the policy of the school on appropriate school management strategies and what is not permitted in a particular school. Now we will see some of the examples of punishment that are commonly used in schools. Loss of recess or break time, extra homework, loss of other privileges, and standing during class hours. Examples of more restrictive and inappropriate punishments could include sending a student to a solitary time-out room and missing lunch break. Many teachers use behavior management systems that utilize both reinforcement and punishment. We will discuss some of the strategies here. These strategies are very popular in many classrooms because they are easy to implement and the students know exactly what is expected of them. Some of the examples that we will see today are earning points, a behavior change system where students earn points by engaging in specific behavior and then at a specified time can exchange those points for desired items. Next is group contingencies. These type of contingencies occur when one consequence is delivered based on the behavior or performance of either certain students or all of the students in the classroom. There are three different types of group contingencies. First is independent group contingency. A reward is available to all the students in the classroom, but only students who meet the specific criteria earn the reward. Next is dependent group contingency. The award for the entire group is dependent on the behavior or performance of one specific student or a small group. And the next one is interdependent group contingency. All of the students in the classroom are required to meet the specific criteria, both individually and as a group, before earning a reward. Teachers can keep in mind certain points while using reinforcement in classroom. The teacher has to be sure to only reward those behavior that he or she would like to strengthen and see again in the future. It is easy to inadvertently reinforce negative behavior without realizing it. For example, a child cries in a store because the child wants a toy. Parents eventually give in and buy the toy. So the next time when the child wants a toy, he or she is going to cry. In this example, the behavior of crying was positively reinforced. So the behavior continues to be seen in future. The teacher can vary the type of reinforcement used to avoid overindulgence of a particular item or activity. For example, if parents always reward the child with a cookie for good behavior, the child is likely to get tired of the cookie and may stop engaging in the desired behavior. So, before choosing a reward, the teacher needs to find out what the child is currently motivated at. Some children may be motivated by the same item for longer periods of time, and others may change their motivation more frequently. The teacher needs to be consistent with the delivery of reinforcement in order to maintain the desired behavior. Similarly, while punishing a student, the teacher needs to keep in mind certain things. The teacher needs to be sure to only punish behavior that needs to be decreased. In addition to advertently reinforcing negative behavior, it is also possible to accidentally punish appropriate behavior. And while punishing a behavior that needs to be decreased, the teacher has to make sure to continue to reinforce appropriate behavior. If the teacher finds that a particular behavior is not decreasing using a punishment technique, then the teacher needs to re-evaluate the consequence and try something else. The teacher needs to re-evaluate what punishing consequences to use based on child's current motivation. And lastly, the teacher needs to be consistent with the delivery of consequences in order to decrease the undesired behavior. So far, today we have discussed the terms discipline and punishment. Then we learnt about the importance of discipline. Then we discussed corporal punishments and types of punishments. Then we talked about positive discipline and its historical background. And lastly, how to use reinforcement in classroom. With this, we have come to the end of today's session. Thank you.